I come to the next sutta, 12.51. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. There the Blessed One addressed the monks as, "Monks, Noble Sir," those monks replied. The Blessed One said this, "Monks, when a monk is making a thorough investigation, in what way should he thoroughly investigate for the utterly complete destruction of suffering? Noble Sir, our teachings are rooted in the Blessed One, guided by the Blessed One. Take recourse in the Blessed One. It would be good if the Blessed One would clear up the meaning of this statement. Having heard it from him, the monks will remember it." "Then listen and attend closely, monks. I will speak." "Yes, Noble Sir," the monks replied. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is asking the monks, how should a monk thoroughly investigate so that he can destroy suffering. So they asked the Buddha to explain. So the Buddha said, "Here, monks, when he makes a thorough investigation, a monk thoroughly investigates thus: the many diverse kinds of suffering that arise in the world, headed by aging and death. What is the source of this suffering? What is its origin? From what is it born and produced? When what exists, does aging and death come to be? When what does not exist, does aging and death not come to be?" As he thoroughly investigates, or he thoroughly contemplates, he understands thus: the many diverse kinds of suffering that arise in the world, headed by aging and death. This suffering has birth as its source, birth as its origin. It is born and produced from birth. When there is birth, aging and death comes to be. When there is no birth, aging and death does not come to be. He understands aging and death, its origin, its cessation, and the way leading on that is in conformity with its cessation. He practices that way and conducts himself accordingly. This is called a monk who is practicing for the utterly complete destruction of suffering, for the cessation of aging and death. I stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha says, if a monk wants to destroy suffering, he should contemplate thoroughly. He contemplates what is the source of suffering. And then he understands that this world is suffering because of impermanence. The strongest characteristic of the world is impermanence. Everything in the world is impermanent. There's not a single thing in the world, in the universe, that is permanent. So that is why we talk about anatta. Anatta, sometimes people translate as no soul. That's a wrong translation. It's not no soul. It is. It means there is nothing that is permanent, that does not change according to conditions. If there is something that does not change, then you can say that is me, right? But if everything changes, then whatever you take yourself to be, in a while you will die. You will die off, and then you change to something else. So because of that, this concept of no self or not self, the Buddha spoke. It's not that there is no soul. It's just that there is no thing that is unchanging. There is no essence, core in us that is unchanging. Everything inside us is changing. So we are just a flux of conditions. So because of this impermanent nature of the world, there is suffering. Because whatever we experience that gives us pleasure, gives us happiness, we want to cling to it. We don't want it to change. But it is impossible. Anything that we are happy with, it must change. Even our happiness itself is not permanent. So because of that, when the happiness goes away, then suffering takes its place. So this world is a world of happiness plus suffering. So because of that, we generally say it is a world of suffering. And you cannot change the nature of the world. The only thing is, once you exist in the world, you must experience this characteristic of the world, which is impermanence, leading to suffering. So if you don't want to have suffering, then you should not be born into the world. The moment you are born into the world, this is the world of suffering. So he understands that the origin of suffering is birth. If there's no birth, there's no suffering. It's because there is birth, there is suffering. So once he understands that, then he practices for the complete destruction of suffering. How does he practice? That means he practices according to the Dhamma, so that he is not born again. Then the Buddha continues. Then, investigating further, he thoroughly investigates thus. What is the source of this birth? What is its origin? From what is it born and produced? What is the source of this being, this clinging, this craving? These 12 links, he considers what is the source. As he thoroughly investigates, he understands thus. Volition has ignorance as its source, ignorance as its origin. It is born and produced from ignorance. When there is ignorance, volition comes to be. When there is no ignorance, volition does not come to be. He understands volition, its origin, its cessation, and the way leading on that is in conformity with its cessation. He practices that way and conducts himself accordingly. This is called a monk who is practicing for the utterly complete destruction of suffering, for the cessation of volition. Stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is saying that when a monk he considers thoroughly, then he begins to understand that there are these 12 links of dependent origination that gives rise to suffering, and the ultimate condition is ignorance. From ignorance you have volition, and then from volition you have consciousness, etc. So he, understanding this, he practices to destroy all these 12 links. In that way he can destroy suffering. Monks, if a person immersed in ignorance generates a meritorious volition, consciousness fares on to the meritorious. If he generates a demeritorious volition, consciousness fares on to the demeritorious. If he generates an imperturbable volition, consciousness fares on to the imperturbable. I'll stop here for a moment. So here the Buddha is saying, if a person out of ignorance, he generates meritorious volition, that means he generates good karma. If he generates good karma, the consciousness will bring him to a good rebirth. And then if he generates bad karma, evil karma, then the consciousness will bring him to this evil, woeful plane of rebirth. But if he generates an imperturbable volition, probably meaning high state of jhana, which is imperturbable, unshakable, like the fourth jhana onwards is considered an imperturbable state. So he will be born in that realm called the imperturbable realm. That means the high jhana heavens there. And then the Buddha says, but when a monk has abandoned ignorance and aroused true knowledge, then with the fading away of ignorance and the rising of true knowledge, he does not generate a meritorious volition, or a demeritorious volition, or an imperturbable volition. Since he does not generate or fashion volition, he does not cling to anything in the world. Not clinging, he is not agitated. Not being agitated, he personally attains Nibbana. He understands, destroyed is birth. The holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more for this state of being. Stop here for a moment. So, the Buddha says, if a person is practicing to be liberated, then he does not generate meritorious volition or demeritorious volition or imperturbable volition. Then he does not cling to anything in the world. He does not want anything in the world. Then only he attains Nibbana. If he feels a pleasant feeling, he understands it is impermanent. He understands it is not held on to. That means it's not clung to. He understands it is not delighted in. If he feels a painful feeling, he understands it is impermanent. He understands it is not held on to. He understands it is not delighted in. If he feels a neither painful nor pleasant feeling, he understands it is impermanent. He understands it is not held to. He understands it is not delighted in. If he feels a pleasant feeling, he feels it as detached. If he feels a painful feeling, he feels it detached. If he feels a neither painful nor pleasant feeling, he feels it detached. Stop here a moment. So here the Buddha is saying that this monk, whatever feeling he experiences, he is detached from it. When he feels a feeling terminating with the body, he understands, I feel a feeling terminating with the body. When he feels a feeling terminating with life, he understands, I feel a feeling terminating with life. He understands, with the breakup of the body, following the exhaustion of life, all that is felt, not being delighted in, will become cooled right here. Mere bodily remains will be left. Suppose, monks, a man would remove a hot clay pot from a potter's kiln and set it on smooth ground. Its heat would be dissipated right there, and potsherds would be left. So too, when he feels a feeling terminating with the body, terminating with life, he understands, with the breakup of the body, following the exhaustion of life, all that is felt, not being delighted in, will become cool right here. Mere bodily remains will be left. Let's stop here for a moment. So here, this monk who has finished his work, when he knows the end of life is coming, then he understands that following the death of the body, all the experiences of life will become cool. So only the body will remain. And we have not become liberated. We are passionate about life. There are so many things we are concerned about in life. But then a lot of people, when they are dying, they think of many unimportant things. And they think it's very important. They haven't done this. They worry about their son who is not married. They worry about this. They worry about their property, worry about their young wife, and all these things that are not important at all. Because when the body dies, the life that we have led will become like a dream that has gone by. Every life we experience is one dream after another, one dream after another. And when it is finished, anything connected with that life actually is not important at all. It's just a dream gone by, not important at all. Just like when we dream at night, when we have a nightmare, in the nightmare itself, we are so frightened, we are so excited, and we strive with all our energy to either to fight off the evil or to escape from being killed and all that. And then when we wake up, then we think about it. Just now I was so excited, just now I was so worried. Actually, it's nothing to worry about, right? So in the same way, life, when we are alive, we think that everything in life is so important. But when we die, all the things are not important. What is important is where we are going for rebirth. That is important. So if we realize this earlier, we would have started our preparations for the next phase of our life. People, they don't realize that to prepare for your rebirth takes many years, many years. So you can't like last minute, they're going to die in a few days' time. You think what to do. Too late already. Need at least 10 years to prepare to get a reasonable, good rebirth. So it's a thing to remember when we are dying. All that has happened in life will grow cold. Not important at all. What do you think, monks? Can a monk whose asavas are destroyed create a meritorious volition or a demeritorious volition, or an imperturbable volition? No, Venerable Sir. When there are utterly no volitions, with the cessation of volitions, would consciousness be discerned, be seen? No, Venerable Sir. When there is utterly no consciousness, with the cessation of consciousness, would mentality, materiality be discerned, be seen? No, Venerable Sir. When there is utterly no mentality, materiality, then there is no six sense basis, no contact, no feeling, no craving, no clinging, no being, no birth. And with the cessation of birth, there will be no aging and death. So the Buddha said, good monks, it is exactly so and not otherwise. Place faith in me about this, monks. Resolve on this. Be free from perplexity and doubt about this. Just this is the end of suffering. So the Buddha said, have faith in him. What he says is true. He is not lying to us. So in this sutta, the Buddha says, if we want to understand how to end suffering, we have to consider, contemplate these links one by one. That actually suffering comes about because we are in this world. But if we are not born into this world, then there is no suffering. And how not to be born in this world is to the source of birth, is to stop the source of birth, which is being. And then to understand that being comes from clinging or attachment, attachment comes from craving, etc. Then that is understanding how suffering originates and how suffering can end. Then if you are walking the path to be liberated, then you don't want to generate any volition because you don't want to be attached to anything in the world. So you don't want anything at all. 12.52 at Savatthi. Monks, when one dwells contemplating gratification in things that can be clung to, craving increases. Let's stop here for a moment. Here the Buddha says, if you dwell contemplating gratification, that means satisfaction. Satisfaction with things that you cling to, then craving increases. For example, if you have a big house, you have a big car, you have a lot of property and wealth, then when you contemplate all your wealth, then you are very satisfied. But your craving will increase. With craving as condition, clinging comes to be. With clinging as condition, being. With being as condition, birth. With birth as condition, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure and despair come to be. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. Suppose, monks, a great bonfire was burning, consuming 10, 20, 30 or 40 loads of wood, and a man would cast dry grass, dry cow dung and dry wood into it from time to time. Thus sustained by that material, fueled by it, that great bonfire would burn for a very long time. So too, when one lives contemplating gratification in things that can be clung to, craving increases. And from craving, you have all the other things, clinging, etc. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. So here the Buddha is saying, just like a big fire, if you keep throwing three things into it, dry grass, dry cow dung and dry wood, the fire will continue to burn. It will not stop. So in the same way, our fire is fueled by three things. Just like these three things. The three things within us is the greed, hatred and delusion. So this greed, hatred and delusion will keep the fire burning, the fire of this round of rebirths, so samsara. So that's because we are satisfied with life, and our craving, instead of decreasing, our craving increases. Anything in the world that we enjoy, then our craving will increase. And then our clinging also will increase. And then the Buddha said, monks, when one dwells contemplating danger in things that can be clung to, craving ceases. With the cessation of craving comes cessation of clinging. The cessation of clinging, cessation of being, cessation of birth, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure and despair cease. Such is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. Suppose, monks, a great bonfire was burning, consuming 10, 20, 30 or 40 loads of wood, and a man would not cast dry grass, dry cow dung or dry wood into it from time to time. Thus, when the former supply of fuel is exhausted, that great bonfire, not being fed with any more fuel, lacking sustenance, would be extinguished. So too, when one lives contemplating danger in things that can be clung to, craving ceases, and when craving ceases, clinging ceases, etc. Such is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. That's the end of the sutta. So here, the second part is that when a person realizes danger in the things that he clings to, then craving ceases. And what is that danger? The danger is that it is impermanent, and because it is impermanent, it will give you suffering. I remember last year I was talking to one of our Buddhist supporters, devotees in Kuala Lumpur. He had a son who went overseas to study, and I think he went swimming and he drowned and died. And because this man only had one son, I think one son and two daughters or something like that. So when the son died, he and his wife felt so much pain, so much suffering. And then he told me something which struck me. He told me after that experience, he dare not love the daughter so much. The more you love, when it goes away, the pain is unbearable. So because of that, he said, dare not love the daughter so much now. It shows he's a smart fellow. Not many people will realize this. So here the Buddha is saying that when one contemplates the danger of the clinging, that craving, that means that suffering will follow. Then he lets go of that craving. So actually you see, the best teacher in the world is suffering. If we don't suffer, we don't realize. So we have to suffer. It's just like a small kid, tell you not to play with fire, he won't listen to you, right? He will continue to play until he gets his fingers burned. Then you don't have to tell him, he will automatically stop playing with fire. So the world is like that. When we are young, we want to experience all the pleasures in life. We want to be a macho, we want to be a great hero, go into this and go into that. And then when we suffer, then we realize. But there are some people, and their karma is good enough, they can get out of it. But there are some people, their karma is not so good. When they suffer, they don't get out of it. When I was young, I had a neighbor, young guy, young man. So he joined a bad company, ended up becoming a drug addict. Once you become a drug addict, it's almost impossible to get out of it. So I think he could be like one of those just die on the 5-foot path on the roadside. So it's very pitiful. So if we get caught by this state, then you can't get out of it. Nidana-samyutta, quite a lot of suttas as well. Try to go to one more sutta. 12.60. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling among the Kurus, where there was a town of the Kurus named Causation. Then the Venerable Ananda approached the Blessed One, paid homage to him, sat down to one side and said to him, "It is wonderful, Venerable Sir, it is amazing, Venerable Sir. This dependent origination is so deep in implications. Yet to me it seems as clear can be." Stop here for a moment. So Venerable Ananda is disclosing to the Buddha that actually dependent origination is very deep, But to him, it seems so clear that he understands it so clearly. And then the Buddha said, not so, Ananda, not so, Ananda. This dependent origination is deep and deep in implications. It is because of not understanding and not penetrating this Dhamma, Ananda, that this generation has become like a tangled skein, like a knotted ball of thread, like matted reeds and rushes, and does not pass beyond the plane of misery, the bad destinations, the netherworld, samsara. Here the Buddha is saying, this generation, people have become like a tangled skein, is a loosely called bundle of yarn or thread, all tangled up. The thread is all tangled up and knotted. So why is it that Ananda is supposed to be a Sotapanna? And he says he can see a dependent origination clearly, but the Buddha says no. Actually, we find in the Vinaya books, after the Buddha was enlightened, then even after enlightenment, he wanted to understand dependent origination. And he stated that he spent the whole night from 6 p.m. until 6 a.m. For 12 hours. He was contemplating dependent origination, how suffering arises, how suffering ceases, and how suffering arises and ceases. 12 hours. Then only he fully understood. So you see, even Sammasambuddha, to understand, it's not that the Sammasambuddha knows everything, but a Sammasambuddha or an Arahant, he can know if he takes the trouble to contemplate. So he has got to take the trouble to contemplate. So like the Buddha, his understanding of the dependent origination is much deeper than, remember, Ananda, for the simple reason that the Buddha used his psychic power to see how beings die and pass away, how dependent origination works through many lifetimes. So because he could see it clearly, contemplating the past, contemplating the present, contemplating the future, and he understood thoroughly, but it took him 12 hours. Whereas Ananda could only understand superficially what is around, he could see, remember Ananda, but Ananda did not have the psychic power to see the past, the present and the future. They couldn't have understood so deeply. And then the Buddha said, Ananda, when one dwells contemplating gratification in things that can be clung to, craving increases. With craving as condition, clinging comes to be. With clinging as condition, etc., etc. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. Suppose, Ananda, there was a great tree, and all its roots going downwards and across would send the sap upwards. Sustained by that sap, nourished by it, that great tree would stand for a very long time. So too, when one lives contemplating gratification in things that can be clung to, craving increases. And when craving increases, then clinging, with craving as condition, clinging comes to be, etc. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. So here the Buddha is saying, just like a big tree, its roots will take in all the nutriments and send it up to the tree so that it will survive for a very long time. So in the same way, we are fed, we continue to survive in this round of rebirths because of our nutriment of greed, hatred and delusion. As long as we have greed, hatred and delusion, this will sustain us in the round of rebirths. When Ananda, one dwells contemplating danger in things that can be clung to, craving ceases. With the cessation of craving comes cessation of clinging, etc. Such is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. Suppose, Ananda, there was a great tree. Then a man would come along bringing a shovel and a basket. He would cut down the tree at its foot. He would winnow the ashes in a strong wind, or let them be carried away by the swift current of a river. Thus the great tree would be cut off at the root, made like a palm stump, obliterated so that it is no more subject to future arising. So too, Ananda, when one dwells contemplating danger in things that can be clung to, craving ceases. With the cessation of craving comes cessation of clinging. With the cessation of clinging, cessation of being, and then cessation of birth, aging and death, sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure and despair. Such is the cessation of this whole mass of suffering. That's the end of the sutta. So in the same way, the Buddha says, if we understand these 12 links, then we have cut off this ignorance. And when we have cut off this ignorance, then the whole chain slowly will break up from ignorance. And this volition ceases, and then consciousness ceases, etc. So that's the way to end. So for us to do that, we got to cut ignorance. We have to understand the Dhamma, and then we practice to cut off greed, hatred, and delusion. So I'll stop here tonight. This sutta that I just read is often quoted, where Venerable Ananda says, dependent origination to him is so clear, but the Buddha says, not so. That means you don't really understand